Welcome to Taming Disaster with Drones for Good podcast. Tune in for in-depth interviews, one-of-a-kind perspectives, and insightful conversations with industry leaders who are using drones to help prepare for, respond to, and recover from complex emergencies and major disasters around the world. And now, from the AIRT Studios in Miami, Florida, the heart of Hurricane Alley, here is your host, Christopher Todd.
All right, welcome to another edition of Taming Disaster Drones for Good. I'm Christopher Todd. We are here in our third episode of the year, and joining us today is the co-founder and CEO of Measure and new member of the Drone Advisory Committee, Brandon Toris Declet. Brandon, welcome to the program. How are you?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me on, and I've been looking forward to the invitation of this podcast for quite some time now.
Well, I've been looking forward to having you on, and it's in light of your newly appointed position with the DAC, it's even more exciting because I know everybody out there wants to kind of get an update on what the Drone Advisory Committee is doing, and it's good to have some new blood on that. But before we even get into that, let's back up a little bit because I think a lot of people out there probably know you. They probably know your story, but not everyone. So for the uninitiated, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got involved in the unmanned aviation sector.
Yeah, no, good question, Chris. It has been 7 years now, I think, since I first started out in the drone industry. And so back in, I'd say mid 2014, which seems like a lifetime ago after the pandemic and everything that's gone on in this space and with the company, I had an idea to start what was then kind of a drone services business. And we coined this idea of drone as a service, where we were going to go out to these big companies and take drones and hire full-time pilots and go out there and do, infrastructure inspection on pipelines and transmission lines and cell towers. And it was an exciting time because really our vision then was to build what was, the nation's largest drone service provider. And, we did that over the course from 2014 to about 2019. Raised $30 million, grew probably the largest, drone service provider in the country at the time. We were operating, 24/7, 365, had over 50 employees spread across the United States. And it was exciting, right? No one was doing as many kind of commercial drone flights as we were. We pushed the boundaries on regulation. We were working with, American Red Cross, some major companies, working with the FAA to expand. And this is before Part 107, expand Section 333. Then Part 107 happened and kind of the floodgates opened. And it was great, right? So all these people got super excited about our industry. People were getting Part 107, drone pilots licenses all over the place. And it was great. And so that business, was wonderful.
Hold that thought before we pivot. I want to ask you, how did you even get started in the drone space, though? I mean, what was your background where one day you said, hey, I'm going to start a drone company?
Yeah. So at the time, I was working in government relations, if you can believe it. And
I believe it.
We also called lobbying, but that's a dirty word here in Washington.
Of course.
And I was working in kind of the defense and national security space. And I'd actually got most of my drone experience within DOD and DHS prior to working in government relations. I'd worked in DOD and DHS on Capitol Hill on drone policy, was super excited about the space, clearly saw the value it was providing to government customers. And then, DJI was coming out with great product. The first line of Phantoms came out. And people were saying, hey, these are not just toys, but these might be commercial tools that we can use to actually do, inspections or surveillance. And, it's funny. I have a funny story because my first foray into this was, how do I get some of the bigger defense contractors like Boeing and In Situ, for example, to think about using the Scan Eagle for commercial purposes like ag, like going and surveying large farms. And I remember trekking out to Washington and meeting with the In Situ folks, and they were looked at me like I was crazy when I said, I just want to find a way to take your Scan Eagle and make it available to commercial customers. And we're going to fly it and we're going to collect all this data. And we're going to basically charge our customer one price for all of it, right? So you were gonna pay, for a piece of infrastructure or a per acre pricing. And In situ was like, we sell these things for $2 million a piece.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, I don't have $2 million, but I'm telling you, there's a market here.
And then DJI comes along with a $200 drone, and it's a game changer.
Yeah, and then they come out with a $200 drone and start iterating every 3 months. And all of a sudden, a huge opportunity opened up, and it was great. And listen, I don't think that there was kind of a more exciting time for our industry when we were kind of first starting out, and people had no idea, where this was going to go. And I'm really, really happily surprised about where we are today, because we're finally at the point where I think, we're seeing real value for customers.
I know PwC had a study back in 2016 projecting roughly $1.25 billion industry in the early 2020s. Goldman Sachs had a $1 billion projection by 2020. I mean, how much of that kind of influenced the market back there? Because we saw companies like Airware, Precision Hawk, kind of leading the charge at that point. And sometimes it's great to be first mover. First mover advantage is definitely certain industries it works well, but maybe not so much in the unmanned systems industry.
Well, that was the thing. And, what I always said, when I started this business is we had to find a way to make money despite the regulations. You had to find a way to make money, and not assume that the FAA was going to all of a sudden allow beyond visual line of sight operations or drone delivery or anything like that. And so, I always told our folks, like, look, we always have to be honest with our customers. We're not going to break the law. We're going to follow the regulations. The FAA is going to develop regulations, and we're going to iterate as those regulations open up. But I think a lot of companies got caught in this trap of, let's raise a lot of money and let's jump directly to that, autonomous future, no pilot in the loop, operating beyond visual line of sight, one to many, and the regulations just weren't there. And when you build a product around a future that is simply, 3, 5, even 10 years in the future, you're just not going to generate the revenue you need to sustain yourself. And all those, listen, I respect all of our competitors, and I consider them all friends and colleagues. We all kind of started around the same time. Listen, Airware, Precision Hawk, Drone Deploy. There was a huge, cluster that started in 2013, 2014, and we all kind of spent years kind of fumbling around and trying to figure out, what is the right product, who is the customer, right? I remember having some pretty wild conversations with, guys like Jonathan Downey, the CEO of Airware, who's great, right? And, about who is the customer? Is the customer, ExxonMobil, or is the customer Measure, or is it somebody else? And, we all had our fits and starts in this space. Look, Drone Deploy started out having, building hardware. They had a box on a drone that they built themselves before they pivoted to software. And we started out as a services company. We made the transition to software. So I think everyone has had a little bit of heartburn over the years about high, no pun intended, but high flying expectations about the size of this market versus what the reality actually was.
Well, yeah, we saw the financial projections, and then we saw the FAA's projections, and you saw kind of the floodgates open with Part 107, where all these people said, hey, I've got a drone. I'm going to be part of this next big ecosystem, and I'm going to go out and be a professional drone pilot. And shattered dreams for many. And we saw that kind of last week with Aviation Week coming out saying that the FAA drone registration numbers were down roughly 50% last year. So, to me, that makes sense, because I think there's a pent-up market or fleet of aircraft from the Phantom 2 up to about 2016 when they first started mandating registration. But yeah, I think it's that adoption cycle that you kind of see where there's a lot of enthusiasm and then it falls off, and now it seems like it's kind of coming up to plateau, and we're going to stabilize where this industry is really headed at this point.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people thought, look, if I get Part 107 license and put out a shingle and say, hey, ABC Drone Services, that the business was going to be there. And it turns out that it's like any other business. It's hard to start a business. It is hard to get customers. It's hard to kind of repeat that and find real growth. So, the ones that I have seen kind of succeed are hyper focused on the local area they live in within, let's say, 100 miles and focused on real estate and construction, local companies doing business for them, even focus in a specific industry vertical, and who keep their costs to a minimum, by as little equipment as possible, and try and squeeze as much as you can out of some of these service contracts. Because look, drone services is like any other services business. Those margins are tough.
Yep.
I know it, and I know them very, very well. You have to kind of be prepared for, the customer is going to pay a price. You can't go back after the fact and say, hey, I had a weather day. Now the price is double.
Yeah.
The customer's just going to say, hey, pound sand, not interested. You can keep your data and never come back on my property. And so those are the challenges when you have a services business. But look, pilots are the center of our industry. I've said this a bunch of times, is that we really need to help pilots. From an professional development perspective, educational perspective, they need to be represented on the DAC. And when we think about regulations, we have to think about what is the impact on pilots, the Part 107 holders, who are in this not because only they do love drones, but I think many of them want to make a business.
Oh yeah, I mean they want to have fun and earn a living at the same time, and
right.
And you can only fly around your neighborhood as a hobbyist so many times. It's either elevate the hobby and become a professional, and it's also interesting because I think you had the newbies out there who were adopting drones and just getting into it, and then you had photographers, like wedding photographers, who already had a business roster, so to speak, and now the drone was just a new tool in their toolkit for aerial production and things like that. But yeah, the commercial segment and the silos is of different vertical markets is really where the money seems to be at. And we saw a couple of companies trying to do the Uber for drones model, which I never was too bullish on. It's too complex. You see any hope for those guys moving forward?
Listen, I have a ton of respect for Dronebase, and I think they're the folks to beat. Dan Burton's built a great team out in Los Angeles, and there's a model there. Don't get me wrong. I think that the challenge becomes, I think, prices in our industry on the services side have really begun to bottom out. For example, in 2018, you could do one wind turbine inspection, $1,000. I think within 12 months, it was half that. Within another 6 months, it was down to $250. And part of that is the technology has proliferated, right? Which is good. More people are flying. There's more drones. There's more pilots. But at the same time, that increased amount of competition increased the supply a great deal. And that those drone pilot marketplaces are filled with folks with all the best intentions to make money and to do what they love. But at the same time, customers are getting smart about, okay, can I get this for cheaper? And so, I don't know what the margins are in those businesses, like Dronebase, but, I go on the forums and I see what's being offered. And, you got to have in my opinion, you got to have a lot of flights, a large pool of pilots for it to work, because a single enterprise customer who wants service is going to want service all over the place, not just in one location. You've got the Fortune 1000 have infrastructure everywhere. So how do you provide that type of service at scale consistently and at a price that makes it worth their while? Yeah,
scaling is the key if you really want to grow the business. So you saw what was happening in the industry. I mean, so Measure's there. Mm-hmm. And at what point did you kind of shift the business model for Measure?
Yeah, so like I said, Chris, we raised significant venture capital money, and we used that money to build out an organization that scaled. So whenever a customer did say to us, hey, we need service in Waco, Texas at our wind turbine farm, or we want you to go survey a transmission distribution line in New York in the same day, we could do that. We were able to do that because we had the funds to basically hire the people, hire the pilots, train the pilots, buy the equipment, and then ultimately and no one talks about this, the most challenging part is moving those people and equipment all over the country all the time. I mean, we were packing up, FedEx, packages in FedEx boxes, or pilots were taking them on the plane with them every day. And these are logistically huge, huge challenges. And what we found when we first started doing a dozen flights, then 100, then 1,000, then thousands of flights, is we had to build out our own workflow. The drone operations workflow, the DSP workflow for as large a company as we were, didn't exist. And there were also no software tools that existed. So we started out with Excel spreadsheets. Chris Courtney, our first chief pilot, started out on Excel spreadsheets. Then we were one of the first customers of Skyward, right? And then we broke Skyward because we were pushing so many flights into their system that they couldn't buy enough, Amazon, AWS cloud computing software. We were on the phone with them on several occasions as we were ramping, saying, "You guys, it's not working." And they're like, "Well, you're eating up all our computing. You're our largest customer from a flight's perspective." And so we got frustrated, and we decided to, we made the decision, Chris, to build it ourselves. We knew how to do operations, but there wasn't a software platform out there that worked for us. And so we hired a couple software engineers, and we started building it. And as they say, eating your own dog food. So, leveraging all of that experience into ground control, our software platform. And then, as technology advanced, and it advanced quickly, we found, our customers who had previously said, "We want you to do our services," starting to say, "Hey, can we train our own people to do this?" And maybe we want to move to a more hybrid approach where we use measures sometimes, but sometimes we want our own employees to have, a drone in their backpack or in their car and do their own type of operations. And we said, well, look, we can do that. Happy to do it. And oh, by the way, the software that we've built for our own operations might work for you. And so we had this kind of aha moment where we said, look, the autonomous future is real. I've never denied that. And we said, look, we can continue to scale the services business. It may cost us a lot of money to do that. The margins aren't as good. Or we can kind of double down on SaaS.
Yep.
and double down on becoming a software business. And that's what we did.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, looking back, what are some of the pitfalls you wish you would have avoided, or what deals do you look back and be like, I wish I would have done that deal?
So we did, and I could talk about this now because I'm not afraid anymore, but we did some of the first Walmart drone deliveries in a tiny town in Texas near Harlingen and Brownsville. Gosh, I don't even remember the name. The town was like 500 people. And we did hundreds of drone deliveries for Walmart. And we were under this crazy NDA with them where we couldn't talk about it at all. And this was several years before, some of the bigger players today who are in the drone delivery space had even done their first delivery. I'm talking like Amazon, Google, Flirty. And it was incredible because, the philosophy that we had at the time, that myself and Jesse and Chris Courtney had, was let's not try and build our own hardware. Let's see what we can do with existing DJI platforms, right? And building drop mechanisms with existing. So we were really focused on, taking existing drones, putting on, delivery mechanisms to them, and doing drone delivery. And I believe, the Aerobotics platform that we used Aerobotics, we used DJI, we used Aerotronics. We actually got that thing type certified for deliveries with the help of the Texas test site. And I want to say, if I looked at I have framed checks in my office from Walmart because they were some of the bigger checks we ever had. If I look at these dates, this is 2016. So Chris, back in 2016, Measure
5 years ago.
5 years ago,
yep.
Measure was doing daily drone deliveries in a small town in Texas.
And couldn't talk about it.
Which, by the way, kills me to this day because I think, it would have been pretty game-changing for us to talk about. Now, I don't know who ended up in the Smithsonian with the first drone delivery drone. But props on them for being able to get out in front of it and do better marketing than we did. But I have those checks here framed to prove in 2016 that those drone deliveries are happening.
So, we saw 3D Robotics and kind of the evolution that they went through trying to produce a drone, and then DJI just basically crushing them on pricing. Mm-hmm. And fast forward to today, and we've got the industry's first unicorn with Skydio now with a valuation over $1 billion.
Great.
What's changed?
I think Skydio is an interesting case, and I've talked to Adam Bree several times. We sat on panels together. Super smart guy, and when Skydio first started, I thought, okay, here's another 3DR, or here's another name your U.S. drone hardware company. But I think the difference is they were really focused on building a high quality product. And they were focused on building a high quality product with manufacturing here in the United States that could do not just, one or two platforms, but hundreds and thousands of platforms. And I think what they were trying to duplicate is what DJI did in China. And look, part of it is the timing is almost everything, right? And so, 3DR came and went. There's plenty of other hardware companies that came and went. I think Skydio looked at this and said, hey, we're going to build a platform here that is competitive with what DJI has built. And I look at their product in the Mavic series of DJI products. They say, okay, there are some similarities here, which is a great product, by the way. And they decided to build that closed ecosystem, right? They decided to, we're not going to have an SDK. We're going to have our own flight application, our own hardware, and very similar to DJI, kind of build that tech stack. And I think it's worked. The issue is it's very expensive to build your own ecosystem. So, Adam's done exactly the right thing. He went to, the biggest VC out there, Andreessen Horowitz. When you talk about who the number one firm is, it's them. And, with a lot of money and operational experience to put into Skydio. So I think it's great. I think that, Skydio winning the SRR with Parrot, Skydio really spinning up a high quality product here in the United States is really good news. But I think it's two things. It's timing, really good timing. Adam's got great timing, and a great partner in Andreessen who recognizes that it's going to take big checks to get Skydio where it needs to be if it wants to ultimately compete with DJI. Because right now, there really is no competing with DJI. People can talk about U.S. manufacturers, but DJI still owns 70% of the market. Yeah,
and you hit the nail on the head. And to compete, you're going to need a hell of a lot of runway to be able to finance the growth and the market penetration to go up against DJI. But that being said, it seems like Skydio's carved out a pretty good niche in public safety, an area where maybe DJI was a little bit vulnerable due to security concerns at the federal level. So.
Yeah, and partnering with Axon is super smart. Axon has basically a lock on law enforcement. And I like the public safety market. I used to work for the NYPD. I've worked in the public sector before. There's money that's going to be spent there on drones, on body cameras, and Axon has a lock when it comes to those things. And partnering with them is a super smart move.
So let's talk about the Drone Advisory Committee and how you got involved. I know there's an application process, so congratulations for being selected and installed. Tell us a little bit about it and what do you see as some of your goals and what would you like to accomplish as a member?
Yeah, so thanks. I think this is my third. Try trying to get on the DAC. When the DAC was initially set up. It really excluded, and this is when we were still in the services business, it excluded DSPs completely. There were no DSPs serving on the DAC, and which was shocking because the argument I was making, and at the time it was the Obama administration that I made was, who on this committee has operational experience? Who's actually out there flying every day? And the answer that came back was, well, CNN is on there and BNSF are on there. And I was like, great, yes, but they're so narrowly focused. I mean, CNN is doing, videography, and BNSF is doing some very narrowly focused BVLOS operations in, I don't know, Mexico or out west somewhere. But I said to the folks at DOT, I said, no one else, to my knowledge, is doing as many commercial operations as we are across different applications and knows more about how drones are actually operating in the National Airspace System than us. Nobody liked that too much. They thought I was pushing too hard. So look, I had my shot. I did the drone registration task force. I thought that was a good experience. I put in my application once, didn't get it, twice, didn't get it. And this time around, I think, we applied as a software company, not as a services company. And I mean, maybe that did the trick, but, I think it's a great opportunity to go in there because, it's not like that operational experience went out of my head when we became a software company, but to go in there and offer, the measure perspective, our customers' perspective on where we think drone regulations need to go. Look, the biggest challenge with the DAC, as with any committee, is it's a committee. There's a lot of different voices. It's bureaucratic, but it's the only mechanism kind of we have to ensure that the FAA promulgates regulations that ultimately make sense for our industry, and that are ultimately safe, right? No one wants drones crashing into people or property. And at the end of the day, I often tell folks, our industry doesn't have a technology problem anymore. The tech is there. I could fly 50 drones right now, probably with one or two human beings beyond visual line of sight. That ain't the issue. The issue is, can I do it legally? And can I repeat it, over and over legally? And that's just going to take us working on the DAC and with the DOT and the FAA to get there. But again, my caution to everyone in this space is just be aware of how long regulations take to actually come into effect. It's not a 6-month process, a 12-month process. It's a year's process. So, hunker down, advocate, but don't expect, the government ever to move fast.
That's actually a really great point, because there is frustration, especially from those of us who are used to working in a tech environment, that, things move at lightning speed and government does not. And it's been impressive to kind of see the FAA move I would say is swiftly for them. Mm-hmm. But of course, the tech industry wants faster, better, more. So c'est la vie.
It is going to be the constant friction point.
Yeah.
For our industry is the FAA will never move as fast as we want it to, and no regulatory agency will, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Where do you see these systems kind of heading down the road? I mean, you mentioned public safety. You work for NYPD. I mean, what do you see as like the value proposition kind of for disaster response and for public safety moving forward?
Yeah, look, I always thought that the best application was going to be get a very easy to use, relatively inexpensive drone in the trunk of every police car, of every fire truck, and every ambulance, and make it so that it becomes a tool. I think for too long in our industry, we have just been wrapped around the axle about how cool drones are. And frankly, we need to kind of dial that back and get people familiar with this idea that it should be as useful and as easy to use as your iPhone. And whatever data you're collecting, whether it's live stream or some sort of 3D model, it has to be easily digestible in the moment, in real time, but also shareable as easy as you would send a text message, a text picture, or a voicemail. And that level of simplicity, in my opinion, is really going to drive adoption for public safety and for disaster response.
All right. As we wind this down, I want to give you an opportunity to share any final thoughts you have for the listeners out there, and where can we expect to see you moving forward?
Well, Chris, I just want to say thanks again for the invitation. It's always great to talk to you, and this is a great podcast. I guess the final thing I'd say is I think we're in for an exciting couple of years. I think you were going to see things like the remote ID regulations become finalized. The technology is moving faster than ever. And I think you're going to see greater and greater adoption, both in public safety as well as in commercial and government sectors. And that means that we are getting closer, in my opinion, to the day we can look out the window and see drones flying past the way we've been talking about it for the past 6 or 7 years. And so I'm as excited today about our industry as I was 7 years ago. I think I've made some great friends in this industry. I like the competition. I respect everyone who's trying to hustle here. And so I'm in it for the next 7.
All right. And there you have it. Our guest today, Taming Disaster Drones for Good, Brandon Toris Declet, Measure, and the Drone Advisory Committee. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next time on Taming Disaster Drones for Good.
Thank you for listening to Taming Disaster, a production of AIRT, the world's leading nonprofit organization supporting drones for good. Learn more about us online at airt.ngo. And be sure to tune in to our public safety focused podcast, Drone Responders, hosted by Charles Werner.